So I'm going to ask a question that I've asked before, but I'm curious about, okay? How many of you like to fly? If you like to fly, will you raise your hand? Okay? And you love the feeling of getting on the plane and going somewhere in the country or somewhere in the world. Now, how many of you hate to fly? Or dislike it? That's about an equal number right there. And the thought probably terrifies you so much that the thought of it right now, talking about flying, is going to creep you out, and you just want me to move on from flying because maybe you don't like it that much. I like to fly, and that's kind of where I am at. But when I think about this flying illustration, I actually think flying tells us a lot about following Jesus. Because I actually think this process helps us understand what it means to be a disciple of the Lord. So remember back to Chair 1 a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how Chair 1 was titled, what was it titled again? The Lost. And this is where someone sits who's maybe never connected with God, or maybe was connected to God and then moved on from that. But everyone sits there at one point in their life, and we would call them lost, based upon Luke 15, lost. And then we move to Chair number 2. And what's Chair number 2 called? The Believer. Now, this is the moment where we step onto the airplane. Okay, let's think about this. When you're in chair number 1, you've been at your computer or on the telephone looking for the very best flights. You explore all these options. You may even have bought your ticket, and you've gone through security, but you actually haven't committed to getting on the plane yet. And once you get on that plane, you know this, and the doors are locked, you basically have no option but to fly on that plane, and you're on there until it lands somewhere. I actually think that when we move from chair number 1 to chair number 2, it's like when we get on the plane, and we're putting our life in the hands of the pilot, not just for our own life, but we're also putting our baggage in the hands of the pilot. And it's in this step we move from being lost and being fully, or at least committed, to following Jesus because we've had some encounter with God in our life. We maybe thought about it for a little while. We may have entertained it and hung out. We may have looked at our options. But when we go from chair number 1 to chair number 2, we're committing to getting on the plane. We're committing ourselves to Jesus and trusting God to be the Lord of our life. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to move on. You're on the plane, okay? You're seated on the plane, and you start settling in, right? The flight attendants come by. They might give you a pillow, or they might give you a blanket, or some snacks, or some earphones. And really, you're not really concerned about the people around you. You simply just try to get situated and comfortable and figure out how you're going to entertain yourself for the next number of hours. And this is similar to the second stage of discipleship. People who are sitting in chair number 2 are spiritual infants, and they're just learning how to walk like Jesus, and they're just learning about God's story in their lives and their own story, and they're just learning how to read the Bible on their own, but they're still figuring it out because there's a lot of weird stuff in the Bible, and they don't know what to do with it. And people in chair number 2 are trying to understand this and how they can lead a Christian life. But these people on the plane, they recline back in their chair, and they pull down the tray, and they just basically, in the Christian way, they just like to listen to the best preachers and teachers in the world as they sit back and relax on the plane. And they don't think too much about how to care for and serve people around them because they're just trying to figure out what it means to follow after Jesus in chair number 2. But then people move from chair number 2 to chair number 3. What was chair number 3 again? The workers, okay? And these are the people who are beginning to use their gifts for God, and they begin to think about how they can serve other people, and they begin to know their God-given purpose in life. And people in chair number 2 on the airplane are a unique breed of people. The people on the plane, these are the people who really try hard not to inconvenience anyone else. They're the kind of people who never get up to use the bathroom on the plane. And these are the kind of people who are willing to sit in the middle seat on the airplane, okay? My least favorite spot on the airplane, right? I will always make my own seats, and I will pay extra to get me out of the middle seat because I hate that feeling, right? That parents are like, well, the special graded people in chair number 3 are willing to sit in the middle seats. And these are the kind of people who are only willing to get up to use the bathroom when someone else does in their row because they don't really want to inconvenience anyone. And they go so far that they try to help the flight attendants on their way out by helping picking up trash and making sure their area looks really good, right? So you get what I'm trying to say, right? People in chair number 3 have matured in their faith to realize that the Christian lifestyle is not about them. In fact, they have learned the truth that Jesus says in Matthew 20, right? That the first shall be last and the last shall be first. These are the kind of selfless people who are willing to sit in the middle of the plane or who recognize that the Christian faith is not about them at all. And they've experienced God working in their life through serving and helping other people. And then we finally get to our destination, which is chair number 4. This is the end of the sermon series. And if you remember back to the very beginning, I talked about how I'm inviting us all to take one step. Right? My goal is that each one of us can maybe take one step further into the chair so that we can all end up at chair number 4. And in chair number 4, using our plane analogy, this is when the plane has landed, the stewardess tells us we can take off our seatbelt, and we're beginning to head and send off of the plane. And people in chair number 4, we would call that chair disciple makers. And these are the kind of people who are they're fully equipped to go out and help make other disciples. And so in chair number 2, we talked about how they were, people in chair number 2 are like spiritual infants, right? They were babies, and I talked about my love affair with babies. So that was number 2. And then last week we talked about chair number 3, and they were teenagers, right? And how that's that awkward phase where they need some guidance, but they're being free. But then chair number 4 is what we call a spiritual parent. Your faces, you're distracting me.
Chair numbers are wrong.
Oh, they absolutely are. Absolutely. Thank you for paying attention. So I mean 2, 3, and 4, not 1, 2, and 3. Thank you for that catch, right? I'm glad you're paying attention, right? So, but in chair number 4, sorry, my error, is a spiritual parent. A spiritual parent understands that the journey of discipleship and has experienced success along their life. And the people in chair number 4 have helped other people move from chair 1 to chair 2. Spiritual parents or disciple makers have learned how to help new people, new believers, grow in their faith. And they are beginning to witness a family of seekers or new people learning how to grow their faith under their mentorship. So they are spiritual parents of other maturing disciples. And in time, they will become spiritual grandparents and spiritual great-grandparents as they help people, as the people they disciple go to disciple other people. Okay, so let's look at Jesus for a moment, right? I think Jesus was this classic person. Jesus was most clearly the greatest spiritual parent ever. And Jesus' mission was centered on making disciples, who then make disciples, who then make disciples throughout generations all the way up until today. And Jesus' mission was to not reach the world as much as it was to make disciples who could reach the world. And Jesus spent 3 long years. The Gospels, I bet that was a long 3 years for Jesus. Long 3 years pouring into his disciples, so who then went to help other people become disciples. And so he took them on this journey. Jesus did in this discipleship journey. The disciples, he took them from chair 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and finally helped them go from 3 to 4. And right before he ascended into heaven, he said these words, right? He said, to go and make disciples of all nations. It's Matthew 28. And that's what disciples do. And if you read through Acts, and read through Acts right now in my personal life, and it is fantastic, okay? Because the disciples listened to Jesus' command to go make disciples, And there was like thousands of new disciples being made because the power of the Holy Spirit was on these, not Jesus, but they were on the disciples who were making disciples. And Acts is largely about disciples making other disciples. So if you have your Bible, I would love if you open up to Luke 10. The words will be on the screen as well. But I think this is one of those powerful moments where not only did the disciples make the disciples, but Jesus sent out other disciples for him. And Jesus in this story is right before he's making his final approach to Jerusalem. He's headed for the cross that we remember on Good Friday. And he sends out his disciples, 70 of them. And I would say that these 70 at this moment, they're sitting in chair number 3. And in this story, Jesus goes from chair number 3 of these disciples and helps them become people in chair number 4. And so here's now these words. After this, the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them on ahead of him in pairs to every town and place where he himself intended to go. And this is what Jesus said to them. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Go on your way. See, I am sending you out like lambs in the midst of wolves. Carry no purse, so imagine this. You can't take a purse. No bag. No sandals. And greet no one on the road. Whatever house you enter, first say, peace. Peace to this house. And if anyone is there who shares in peace, your peace will rest on that person. But if not, it will return to you. Remain in the same house, eating and drinking whatever they provide. For the laborer deserves to be paid. Do not move about from house to house. Whenever you enter a town and its people welcome you, eat what is set before you. Cure the sick who are there, and say to them, the kingdom of God has come near to you. I love this story because I think so often in the Christian world, we always focus on the 12 disciples. Right? We talk about the 12 who are famous. We know their names. We know stories about them like Peter and John. I mean, there's so many of the 12 particular disciples. But in this story, we realize that Jesus had more than just 12 disciples. In this story, there were 70 disciples who were seated in chair number 3, and he sent 70 of them to proclaim that the kingdom of God has come near. And many scholars think that 70 is a very significant number. Because in this time period, there was like 70 recorded countries or nations that existed, right? So for Jesus would have thought at that time there was only 70 nations or countries. And so 70 is symbolic because Jesus is sending one disciple to every one of these 70 nations. And Jesus instructs the 70 people, 70 to travel light, not to dilly-dally, to chat with people along the road that they know. They are to receive hospitality, but not abuse it. And they are to extend peace, to cure the sick, and proclaim that the good news of God's kingdom. And if you read on in Luke 10, you hear the 70 come back to Jesus, and the words are profound. And they came back with joy, because the scripture says, even the demons submit to us. That they were able to truly go and be disciple makers in that moment. I think this passage highlights 3 specific things about what it means to be a disciple maker. And the first one is this. The math of disciple making is actually multiplication. Okay. So our goal is to reach new people, see them grow in their faith, and help them, equip them as workers, and send them out to reach new people and launch new ministries. And we send people out into their own, to become spiritual families. And we desire people to go and bear fruit. So we send out people like you, disciples, to go and be spiritual parents for other people. But here's the interesting thing about how the math is multiplication and not addition. So often in the church, this is what we do, right? We invite people to come here, and so we add people through addition, right? Someone comes, and that's kind of addition mentality. Come here, and we grow through addition. But disciple making is different, though. The math of discipleship is multiplication where a spiritual parent might be mentoring 3 other spiritual infants to grow in their faith. And then out of those three mentoring, each one of them goes and mentors 3 other people. And then each one of them goes and mentors 3 other people. Do you get that, right? So it's not about just one-on-one. But if I am mentoring 3 people, and then each of those 3 people go and mentor 3 more people, that disciple making has the potential to be multiplication rather than addition. So let's think about the plane for a moment, right? So the plane lands at Dulles Airport in D.C. Each of those 70 people that Jesus has sent out, now instead, each of those 70 people go and find 3 people. And then that number would be 210 disciples. And if each of those 210 disciples 3 people, guess what that number is? 630, right? And the math keeps compounding throughout the years. So the disciple making isn't simply about adding one to our church. The disciple making is about adding new disciples to Jesus through multiplication. So that's number 1. The second one is this. And let's have some fun with this. Discipleship and evangelism are the 2 wings of the Christianity plane, of the Christian plane. Clearly, I have done terrible on my grammar. Discipleship and evangelism are the 2 wings of the Christian or Christianity plane. And discipleship is impossible without evangelism. Did it change? Jonathan rocks. Okay. Discipleship cannot happen without evangelism, and evangelism cannot happen without discipleship. That the 2 are so connected. And it's interesting because the church never used language of evangelism and discipleship. We use that all the time, right? We talk about evangelism. But it was never talked about in the church until 1850. Until 1850 is when we began to use language of evangelism and discipleship. And before that, all the language that was used in the church was just making disciples. That's all that was said, making disciples. But in 1850, this guy named Charles Adams split that into 2 different things and said evangelism, right, is bringing new people to follow Jesus, and discipleship is growing to be more like Christ. And ever since this division, churches have argued, right? Churches have split over which one was more important, right? Some would say that evangelism was more important, helping new people. And some would say, no, discipleship is more important. But I actually think they're 2 wings of the same plane. We need both to fly. Both are essential for Christianity. One can only help people grow in their faith, become to know Jesus, if they themselves are growing in their faith. And once we grow in our faith, we're naturally inclined to tell other people about Jesus and wanting to help them. So I think evangelism is about sharing our faith with other people. When was the last time you shared your faith with someone else? We come to Bible studies. We come to church. That's discipleship. But when was the last time you shared your personal faith with someone else? And when have you taken the responsibility to grow in your faith as well? The 2 important planes of the Christian life. And then number 3 is this. We will hit turbulence, right? To continue with this plane analogy, right? Sometimes our own sin or fear or distractions or even our own spiritual immaturity will get in the way of us making disciples who will make disciples. It's much easier to stay busy with our church activities and to go about our routine lives that we never begin to help new people know Jesus. And evil will try to get in the way for us. And so we will hit turbulence. We will struggle to be faithful to live out Jesus' ministry. So here's an easy question, okay? Do you want Christianity to grow? Do you want that? Do you want more people to know Jesus? If we want that, we have to learn how to share our faith and send more people out to help others know about Jesus. If we really want Christianity to grow, which is what you all just did, right? I saw your head shaking. Then we must figure out maybe new and creative ways to help new people know Jesus. Sometimes the tried and true things we've always done aren't working. And so we have to begin to think, well, if it's not working, we have to begin to think about what are the new ways to do that. I heard a question recently that was so profound that I wanted to share with you all. And I've been wrestling with this question for about a month since I heard this question. And the question is this: what is the faith of the next generation? What is the faith of the next generation worth? If it's worth a lot, then we have to be willing to stop doing some things and start doing some other things. But if it's not worth anything, then we should remain maybe the same. But what is the faith of the next generation worth? Because if it's not worth anything, we may be in chair number 2. But if it's worth everything, we're in chair number 3, moving to chair number 4, because we just want as many new people to come to know Jesus. And so if that's the case, our heart is already attuned to being in chair number 3 and chair number 4. Jesus sent out 70 who made disciples. Who are we sending out to go and make more disciples? So we've reached the end of the sermon series. You can all say yay and we can be done. But I hope you'll remember these chairs. But what I want you to do in just the last minutes of our time together is I want you to use a section of your bulletin where it says message notes. And I want you to consider this question that I'll put up here. Where are you on this discipleship journey? Where are you? Are you still waiting to follow after Jesus in a real way? And you're not sure if you are ready to make that commitment? Maybe chair number 1. But if you're ready to make that shift, maybe you're beginning to work towards chair number 2. You want to learn more about Jesus and the Bible, and you're willing to discover more. And it might be about you for a time, but that's good. It's a good time for us to learn more about what God has done in our lives, the transformation. Or maybe we're in chair number 3 is that we're good at serving in the church, and we're ready to know our purpose and what we're excited about, and we're there, right? We want to work for Jesus, right? And that is good. Or are you in chair number 4 and discipling other people? I think the important thing, before you think you're in chair number 4, I heard this story, I want a brief kind of thing, that I heard one disciple maker who he said he had a list of 187 people who he has discipled throughout his life. He gave 187 people who he has personally shared Jesus with and has walked with them, didn't just tell them, walked with them to become their own disciples. And so if we're here, we can lift off names of people who we've walked the journey with, who we've helped them become a non-believer to a fully committed disciple of Jesus. So here, where are you? No shame on where you are at, but it's just good to acknowledge where you're at. And I invite you on the messenger to write down what chair you're at, and then consider how you can take the next step in your journey. Where do you need to get to so that you can be a person that Jesus sent out to help new people come to know Jesus? Because that's what Jesus told us to do in Matthew 28. If we don't like it, take it up with the guy upstairs. Jesus said to go and make disciples. That's what he told us to do. So how are we working on that journey?